Today is March 20th, 2026, and we will be discussing some of the claims that were made over the weekend by Tucker Carlson. This is an older story, and I'm sure that anyone who cares about this kind of thing in politics has already heard it. But Saturday evening, Tucker Carlson, the commentator, he dropped a small video where he was discussing the potential for a recommendation by the CIA to the FBI, Trump's Justice Department, for uh, recommending charges against him for FARA violations. And honestly, just to take a second and pontificate for a moment on Tucker Carlson, I've known about Tucker Carlson for a long time. I followed him he's been in my periphery since his time at CNN, and he came into full focus when he took Bill O'Reilly's spot on Fox News. I don't know if that was like 2016, 27, I can hardly remember, but Bill O'Reilly left Fox News and Tucker Carlson took his spot over. And I always like to go down this history because I want people to understand how much of a shifty kind of guy that he is. You know, he was on CNN for a little bit on their Crossfire show where you'd have him and another individual, a debate partner against two other debate partners. That show has since ended on CNN. And then again, he went on to Fox News and he had a segment where he would get people to call in or he would have guests that he would debate with. And typically he would be trolling the guests in the debate, and it was pretty sensational, contentious debates that he would have. At one point, he got into it pretty badly with one of the guests. He was on the phone with the guy had called in to do the interview, and Tucker ended up losing his shit and like cussing the guy out basically. And so they pulled him off of doing that at Fox, and then that's when he started to do just regular interviews and segments on the evening news. And throughout all this time, he was just, a pretty normal right wing, center right kind of guy. Later on, after they pulled him from doing the debates on Fox News and just gave him a regular commentary segment, this is when he started to dive into a lot of very unique, different, some would say conspiratorial topics within political right wing circles. So then after 2020, because of I'm not going to get into the January 6th stuff that eventually led to him getting fired at Fox News. After he left Fox News, he went to start his own company, the TCN network, and this is where you see him now. And again, wide-ranging topics that he talks about. You can't really put him, peg him when it comes to on the political spectrum. I think the best you can probably say about him is that he's more of a libertarian type of guy. Many on the right, of course, love him. But I've always been suspicious of him, not just because of the connection that his family has with the CIA, but also because of how, again, his career, since the 90s, actually, he's been in the public eye. It's just interesting how his career, the trajectory of his career, but also how his perspectives have evolved, if you will. There are a lot of people when he was at Fox News that loved him to death. A lot of boomers loved him. Then after he left Fox and he got on TCN and he started talking more about Israel and being more critical of Netanyahu's government in Israel, the prime minister of Israel, this is when a lot of the people in his normal audience ended up like disowning him, calling him an anti-Semite and Hitler and all of these things. But his audience among younger people actually grew exponentially, and it still continues to grow. So this is one of the reasons why he's one of the most popular and sought after right-wing voices at this point in one corner, and also one of the most hated in the, pro-Israel, Israel first corner. So he made these claims this weekend, and it was pretty interesting. Again, the claim specifically that he made was that the CIA was spying on him. They read his text messages, and they were in the process of making a criminal referral of him to the Justice Department. Now, if that was if this is what's happening, number one, the CIA, it's not constitutional for them to be doing that. I don't doubt that they are, but they would be they would be in a bad place if that came out to be true, to say the least about them. And the first thing that clicks, and we can rewind for a moment and just think about the relationship between Tucker and the Trump administration. Tucker was one of the people that were instrumental, of course, in getting Trump elected because of his platform. He's one of the people that helped convince Trump to hire J.D. Vance, to bring on J.D. Vance as his vice president. And so he's had a pretty tight relationship with the Trump administration. His son, Buckley Carlson, works in J.D. Vance's office. And so he's got a tight knit, he's had a network and a pretty close relationship with Trump up until about a month ago. And things have been simmering for a while between him and the administration, again, because of the anti-Israel, the Israel critical perspectives that he's taken, especially since the war in Iran has started. And so Trump came out about a month ago and was very critical of him, said that Tucker has lost his way, et cetera, et cetera. The typical way, the usual way that Trump trashes people who he thinks are disloyal to him or to his agenda. Because Tucker has really never said much negative. He really hasn't said anything negative about the Trump administration or Trump directly. He's talked about different initiatives. He's been, of course, very critical of the war in Iran, certain individuals around Trump himself, but he's never really been critical of Trump. So it was a big deal when Trump actually came out at the behest, I'm sure, of many of his Jewish handlers within his administration and started being critical of Tucker. And so the first thing that comes to mind when you read about this alleged referral is that perhaps, Trump is wanting to weaponize the intelligence and Justice Department against Tucker. But we'll get on with this and some more speculation. So the charge would be a FARA charge, the Foreign Agent Registration Act, and that's the law that they're going to be using, allegedly, again, to make the recommendation. And so far, the federal government has denied the claim, but because of the network that Tucker has within D.C. and within the administration itself, I don't know that he would lie about that. But again, it's been a week, and we really haven't seen anything progress off from this story. And so FARA requires lobbyist groups that work on behalf of foreign governments or take money from them to register. It's primarily a disclosure rule, and it's enforced very selectively. Of course, over the years, we've heard FARA being referenced in when it comes to AIPAC, I believe, in the idea that AIPAC needs to be registered because of, they basically work on behalf of Israel's government. If you've done any research on AIPAC. But, besides that, I look at this situation overall and just say, if something is going to happen, then let us know when you're going to be indicted. Many people who have been indicted over the past couple of years for political reasons, we know, like within a day before they're indicted, that they're going to be indicted. And when I look at this story, I just say, I'm wondering with Tucker, is he trying to hype something up? Trying to maybe draw attention to himself? I don't know. I have some ideas as we get into the next part of this, which is the Joe Kent resignation. But that's the way I look at it. I'm like, if I'm looking at this story with Tucker isolated, I would just say, hey, if something is going to happen, let us know. But don't make this overhyped. Don't hype this situation up if you're not even sure whether or not this is actually going to happen to you, or you know what I mean. But just my opinion. But that leads us into the next part of the story, which is the Joe Kent resignation. If you don't know Joe Kent, he ran 2 times for, I believe, a House seat between 2020 and 2025. And then he was chosen by Trump to lead the counterterrorism unit under the DNI under Tulsi Gabbard. And this is the story from the Journal. He was the U.S. top counterterrorism official, and he said Tuesday he had resigned over his concerns with the war in Iran, marking the first significant departure from the Trump administration related to the conflict. And the first thing that comes to mind is, why wasn't it Tulsi Gabbard? We sat down for about 6 or 7 years, maybe, and we've watched Tulsi Gabbard's star rise. But the rise, of course, is conspicuous because Tulsi Gabbard started out as a Democrat running in the 2020 elections, I believe. She ran as a Democrat. Later on, she becomes this, in the process between 2020 and 2024, she's like this anti-war libertarian, allegedly. And then she becomes a Republican and a MAGA supporter. So I just thought to myself, that's interesting. This is an opportunist, but she seems, I've seen some clips of her on Joe Rogan and doing various interviews. I said she appears to be someone that, has some integrity and genuinely feels the way she does about certain issues that she talks about. She is a veteran as well, so you would think that maybe she actually does believe in, no new wars and this kind of thing. But she's been silent ever since Trump got back in, and she's observed this hawkish foreign policy that Trump has been engaging in, particularly with the war in Iran. She's been silent. She's been supportive of him. And what do you do? Even just last year, before we bombed the nuclear sites in Iran, Trump publicly disavowed her. He said that because someone on Air Force One said to him, "Well, Tulsi Gabbard at your DNI says that there's intelligence saying that Iran is not pursuing any nuclear weapons program." He said, "Well, I don't believe what she's saying. I'm not worried about what her intelligence says. I don't believe it." So effectively, he threw her under the bus. But so you would have thought that may have been the first defection, but there are a lot of reasons why she's staying on and towing the line. I'm sure she could be a complete sellout, which is what I'm thinking, or could just be maybe trying to stay strategic and stay within the administration because she could probably get more done there or learn more there. I don't know. Or maybe she genuinely believes that just hanging on and playing the team, playing the game and staying on the team and going along with the team is going to be good for her political future. I don't think that's a great bet, because there's a great chance that when the Iran war collapses, when the chaos ensues and the fallout from Trump's failure in Iran happens, towing the line is going to be a huge liability, and it's going to be already too late. But I digress. Joe Kent, who works under Tulsi, he said in his resignation letter, quote, "I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby." So he's a Johnny-come-lately. This is something that many in the social media space has been talking about for quite some time, and that's Israeli capture of American foreign policy. And Joe Kent, years ago, he's been a pretty staunch ally of Israel, and at one point he was actually advocating for destroying Iran's nuclear capabilities. And this was, I think, back in 2020 or 2021. So it's an interesting and abrupt shift in his position on that, and we'll get into some of the reasons why later when we tie Kent and Tucker together. So Kent's abrupt departure is the first significant public sign of dissent within the Trump administration over the president's handling of the Iran war, which is now in its third week. While some Trump supporters outside the administration have been critical of the president's actions, the administration has largely presented a united front, which is definitely unique, especially when you consider how chaotic the first administration was. Trump found loyal people for his second term. Of course, many of them are just completely stupid and incompetent. And they just do what he says. That's probably the worst kind of team that you can have. And if you are a leader and someone who boasts about how well he's managed his companies and himself as president, you should be able to keep your people in line. Whether they like you or not, you need to be able to keep them in line if you're a leader. That's just my thoughts on that. But Kent went on to say, quote, "I always thought he would," I'm sorry, this is Trump in response to Kent, "I always thought he was a nice guy, but weak on security," which is completely contradicting himself. Nothing new for Trump. He said, "When I read his statement, I realized it's a good thing he's out. He said Iran is not a threat." So Kent is an Army veteran who completed 11 combat deployments and a Republican congressional candidate in Washington State in 2022 and 2024, like we were just talking about. And of course, he was an ally of Gabbard. Gabbard, a former Democratic congresswoman, has in the past been critical of foreign entanglements in the Middle East and elsewhere. During Trump's first term, she repeatedly warned against going to war with Iran. She has largely been quiet since the current conflict began February 28th, but she is expected to testify later this week before Congress, which she already did. And it was terrible testimony. She basically caved and said that whatever Trump says is a national security threat is a national security threat, regardless of the intelligence that I put in front of him. And if you look at her demeanor in these hearings, it's such an interesting thing. She just looks lost. You know, she seems to have no scruples about what she knows what she's doing, and she knows how much of a sellout that she is. But the look on her face is just blank. She just doesn't even care, it seems. It's not apologetic. It's not trying to fix anything. It's just blank, as if she was just, it's so obvious that she was coached before these things. And if you look at the hearing and Radcliffe, of the head of the CIA, is talking, he's just like talking to the senators with, normally. And of course, you get badgered in those hearings and this kind of thing, but he had no issues just answering the questions, even if he was lying about some of the things he was talking about and being evasive as they always were. But Gabbard just made it so obvious, so whoever was coaching her just didn't do the best job. So in a statement Tuesday on X, Gabbard didn't address Kent's departure directly, but said it was up to the president, like we just said, to decide what constituted an imminent threat to the U.S. After carefully reviewing all the information before him, President Trump concluded that the terrorist Islamic regime in Iran posed an imminent threat, and he took action based on that conclusion, she wrote. And of course, no matter how often you hear administration officials trying to offload this on Trump, they're complicit in it as well, right? This could be part of that tactic of kind of keeping herself distanced from this situation because she wants a political future or something like that, or she still wants to be viable in the world. When she gets out of the administration, she wants to still be something like politically viable or attractive for maybe independents and the same crowd that was promoting her before she got into the administration. But it's not going to work. So everyone can see what she's doing right now and how she's been silent for nearly a year and a half with what's going on relative to Trump's foreign policy decisions. So Gabbard, and the article continues, Gabbard and Kent along with J.D. Vance, occupied a corner of the broad conservative coalition more skeptical of U.S. military involvement in foreign entanglements that brought Trump back into office in 2024. In his letter, Kent said that he supported the foreign policies campaigned on over the past 3 years, past three presidential cycles, but the president has veered away from his goals of avoiding never-ending wars. And again, some of this stuff is just disingenuous that Kent is saying, because the distinctions now are just, you kind of have to pay attention to them. I've said in a previous video about the Iran war that many in MAGA have said did in fact support no new wars, no boots on the ground, all these other things. But the definitions of all these things are changing every day. They're not calling Iran a war. They're not saying that putting boots on the ground on the islands outside of Iran is putting boots on the ground, since they're not formally in Iran. So the goalposts always seem to move. And I think it's important to pay attention to it, because in this resignation letter, Joe Kent says, well, I don't like the fact that Trump is starting never-ending wars. That distinction right there shouldn't even be there. Just say wars, starting new wars, because what Trump's allies are going to say, what people who promote the war in Iran are going to say, well, it's not a never-ending war. We don't have boots on the ground. We're not occupying. We're not looking to do a regime change there. So you can't really say that. It's like, just say what you need to say. Don't say never-ending wars. Stop with these specific things, because that's what's really allowing Trump a loophole in everything that he's doing. He says, well, I'm not starting a never-ending war. I'm going to get us out of here quickly. Or I'm not putting boots on the ground. I'm putting boots on the periphery. Or they're just special forces. It's not actually the military. Or it's not a formal deployment. The distinctions don't matter. I know that's it's dumb to get into, but I'm just making the point there. So we're going to tie this together. So you have Tucker, who's making this claim about a potential FARA charges against him. Then you have Joe Kent that's resigned. And they both basically meet for an interview about 2 days ago. And J.D. Vance is silent. Both of these individuals are very close to J.D. Vance. And so what are they doing? Let's go through some scenarios here. Let's start, first of all, though, with what J.D. Vance has said specifically about the war, because a lot of people are out there saying that, well, J.D. Vance has been sidelined, which he has, but he really doesn't support the war. And he's trying to keep himself distant and viable for 28. He doesn't want to be attached to the war because X, Y, and Z. He's been silent over the past couple of weeks, is the claim. Well, he hasn't been saying a lot. He hasn't been doing the press junket often. He's been sidelined in major meetings and this kind of thing. But we still have proof that he supports the war, right? He said in comments yesterday during a conference, I believe, he said, it's fine to disagree with President Trump. This is related to Kent. It's fine to disagree with Trump if officials still work to support the president's decisions, Vance said. That's how I do my job. And I think that's how everybody in the administration should do their job too. So, I mean, this is sort of the general atmosphere, if you will, when it comes to how Vance is looking at the war. It's similar to what Gabbard is saying. They're muted. They're not out there cheerleading for the war and Trump's foreign policy decisions relative to the war, but they are giving their approval. It's blatant approval. It's not accidental. It's just they're giving their blatant approval of it. And they're saying that you need to be a team player. Now, again, Kent so this is kind of the circle that we're talking about. Tucker is very close to J.D. Vance, helped him get in office. He's wanting to see him president in 28. Kent is tied to several of the Silicon Valley little tech guys, and they also want to see J.D. Vance as president in 28. And before we get into tying some of this together, this interview that Tucker did with Kent, I know there were a lot of people that it was really huge for a lot of people, and they really wanted to hear what Joe Kent had to say. He really didn't say anything new. That's the problem. I don't know if people were expecting him to drop bombshells or something like that about the administration. He would get snatched up certainly by the FBI quicker than he could even sneeze if he tried to reveal something, Snowden or Assange like, right? He would probably have to leave the country or something. But that's the point. Was he gonna? It's just an aside, but was he gonna go on Tucker and release this expectation that he was going to release some kind of bombshell about the administration? The administration is already claiming that the guy is under investigation by the FBI for leaking, right? So they're already trying to destroy him. I don't know what the expectation is. I think Candace, Tucker, Mark Levin is also supposed to interview him, and that would probably be interesting as well. I don't really like Mark Levin. He's a lunatic. Him and Michael Savage have both turned into lunatics over the past couple of years. I started watching them when I got into politics, 15 years ago, but they're crazy now. But it would be an interesting interview for Mark Levin to watch Mark Levin interview Joe Kent. So the interview was a lot of general stuff, a lot of things that were being implied, but nothing concrete was dropped in the interview. Just an aside. But as I said earlier, Carlson and Kent are deeply tied with Silicon Valley, the little tech oligarchs that paved the way for J.D. Vance and his entire political existence, the Peter Thiels of the world, et cetera, the Thiel PayPal Mafia network. And like we said, they want to see Vance as president. So there's a chance that perhaps this is a way to, Kent and Carlson doing what they're doing, the interview together. They're both, Carlson has put himself in the center of made himself the center of attention again with these alleged CIA investigation. Kent's made himself the center of attention. But the thing they have in common is they're both against the Iran war, which is shaping up to be deeply unpopular. And so perhaps this is a way of moving the Vance wing away from the war too directly, right? They're saying, well, we don't like it. J.D. Vance doesn't seem to like it. And perhaps if they're trying to seed the American mind and help people to start thinking like, well, this group of people, they're not completely on board with Trump's war in Iran, so maybe they're safe. And what I'm saying is, it's perhaps a way of them, it's like an insurance policy. We're uh, we're setting ourselves at this posture. We're taking this posture so that if anything horrible happens with how the Iran war progresses, JD Vance and the people that support him, like again Tucker, Little Tech, and these guys are sort of extricated from it, right? And so protecting themselves from fallout just so that Vance isn't hurt in the future. The big voice is Tucker, and he's wanting to do that too. So if they are, and if they are trying to do this by again remaining highly critical of the war, Tucker specifically, and even Kent, listening to the interview that they did together, they're both still very careful to not alienate Trump and the people who support Trump. So it's kind of a fine balance between, we don't want to alienate Trump, even though it's really his fault, and we also want to kind of make sure that we're separate from these larger foreign policy decisions that could be disastrous politically in the midterms, which they will be in, and in 28 for whoever is potentially running, like Vance. And it's sad that in a way, what Tucker and Kent are doing by doing what I'm describing is they're saying, well, it's Israel, it's Israel, it's Israel. This is what's driving this entire operation. I think that that's true, but it's incomplete. It's Trump as well. And so when again, we understand the political calculus. Don't criticize Trump, because if you do that, it'll alienate the voters who could potentially vote for Vance. But for me, I would say that at least for Tucker, you don't have much to lose in saying, this is Trump also owns this. It's not just Israel. Trump owns this as well. Why do I say that Tucker doesn't have much to lose? It's because Vance, if this is the game that they're playing and they're looking to 28, Vance is already going to have to disavow Tucker anyways, because the Israel lobby and the powerful Jewish groups that are around Trump right now, Vance is going to need them in the future. And they've been saying it since last year that Tucker needs to be disavowed by Vance and alienated. And so at this point, I'm just saying that I don't know if there's much of a reason that Tucker is still trying to, not say Trump's name, even though Trump has trashed him. So, and so that's the reality. It's that Vance's position on the war is kind of irrelevant, because I would say that, so if this scenario that I'm talking about is what's going on, if you have people like Kent and Tucker Carlson and the Silicon Valley Little Tech guys that are trying to keep Vance and this group of people a few steps away from what's going on in Iran and any potential fallout to protect Vance in 28, if they're trying to do that, it seems ridiculous to me. It doesn't seem like there's much of a reason for them to do that, because the biggest thing that's going to matter, I mean, by the time 28 rolls around, I would say that regardless of how the war unfolds this year, short of a complete invasion of Iran or some nuclear weapons being used, I would say that the war is not going to weigh too much on a Vance campaign in 28. The biggest thing I would say, the biggest concern for the moneyed interests, he's already got the Little Tech guys. The biggest concern for the moneyed interests, particularly the Jewish Israeli lobby in this country, is going to be his disavowal of Tucker and anti-Semitism, which he's been mute on. So I would just say that if this is some kind of maneuvering to distance Vance and his supporters like Tucker from the war, I don't know if that's going to really matter, right? Regardless of how the war goes, right? This is going to, I think Trump is going to own this for the most part, and the people directly in his administration. Vance, not necessarily. It's going to be something they can use against him if it does go bad, or worse than it already is. But I think that the bigger question in 28, if Vance even makes it that far, in terms of, if you like, if he even decides to run, I mean, the bigger question is going to be whether he disavows Tucker. So that would be, I think, the bigger thing he's got to think about. That's his biggest liability, and I think that that's pretty obvious. So why even in the interview did with Tucker, again, are they still covering for Trump? So in the end, if this segment on the right wing is unable, and this is kind of a general point I want to make, is that if they're generally unable to take a critical stance on Trump himself and just scapegoat Israel, they're never going to really get to the right place, no matter how many times they mention Israel. So that's overall. I know that was kind of a lot. That's overall one scenario. And again, I don't really buy that scenario that they're looking out for Vance in the future. Vance is, again, his biggest liability, I think, is going to be Tucker. And the other side is, are they covering their asses right now by talking to each other and doing these interviews? They've been friends for a long time, Kent and Carlson. But is this a way of getting ahead of this investigation that the FBI is conducting against Kent, or this alleged CIA situation that Tucker's going through right now with Farah? I'm skeptical. I think that if there's anything going on, it would likely be more damaging for Trump to be pursuing these guys right now, at least, given the war and given how vociferously they've both been voicing their opposition to this war. It would seem that, he probably wouldn't go that far. In wartime, these kinds of things happen. You do see a limitation on civil liberties in wartime. And so it could happen. But I'm saying, in my estimation, I don't think any of those, I don't think they need to cover their ass, because I don't think any of these investigations, if they are happening, would go anywhere anyways. So that's Tucker and Kent. And those are some of my opinions about what's going on with that. And we'll be following the story closely. I'll definitely be hopping back on here if we hear about Tucker getting indicted, but I doubt that we'll need to discuss that. But anyways, that's it for me. If you liked the video, like it, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks.